welcome back to another episode of Cinemacast, guys. The Cinemacast, our movie review podcast right here on YouTube and Rumble. If you guys are following us on either or, happy Memorial Day, guys. Into season 3, we got a nice heavy hitter for you that just recently came out on the 23rd, and this is a good one. It is the wrap up to the franchise for Mission Impossible. This is Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. This is the 8th movie in the franchise that has started back in 1996, which was a spin-off of the original 1960s, I think 60s or 70s TV show. And the movie stars Tom Cruise in every single role, every single film in this franchise. And there's even one thing that strikes me a little bit oddly about the franchise, the way it's gone for the last 30 years. Now, even though this has been a 30-year thing, almost 30 years, you got to take a look at different franchises that have lasted for so long with so many movies under their belt, you know? People look at this as like, "Oh my God, there's 8 Mission Impossible movies? Won't they stop making them?" Like, well, it's a franchise. As long as they got a story to go along with it, they're going to knock it out of the park with each individual one. You know, a franchise that contains a set of movies, you know, along the lines of either the same characters, the same plot line, whatever. You know, whether it's horror, whether it's action, sci-fi, drama, whatever. Now, when you look at Mission Impossible, yes, this is an action spy film. Action spy. There's another action spy film franchise out there. It's been out there since the 60s, and you all know who that is, James Bond. Yes, there are like 25 James Bond movies since the 1960s. So you figure just about 60 years, a little over 60 years for James Bond, and almost 30 years for Mission Impossible franchise. And there's just one little thing that tickles me funny about this. And I was looking at the different films in the franchise, and I was looking at them, and I gotta say, like, going back on the film series, okay, so there's 8 films. You have Mission Impossible, Mission Impossible 2, Mission Impossible 3, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, MI Rogue Nation, MI Fallout. Then you got the one that came out 2 years ago, Dead Reckoning Part 1, and now you got The Final Reckoning. Now, Dead Reckoning and The Final Reckoning, they were both filmed back-to-back. So, yeah, they were going to release as, like, dual film, you know, one right after the other. One was going to release in 2023, the other one was going to be released in the following year. But, you know, with the whole writer's strike going on and stuff, and so several other things that were going on at the time that pretty much postpone these movies in a sense, especially the pandemic that happened in 2020, you know, because before that, Fallout came out in 2018, and that was an amazing entry. I thought that was an amazing entry, and looking back on that one, God, that had a score of, let me see, 98%. Rotten Tomatoes gave Mission Impossible Fallout a 98%. That's how good that movie is. So as the franchise goes on, it gets better and better. Now, everybody will say, when it comes to the Mission Impossible franchise, the oddball child, the dud, is usually the second one. Now, for me, it's my personal favorite. It's my, my guilty pleasure. Even though that movie has a 57% rating, and it was nominated for 2 Golden Raspberry Awards, which is like, you know, the worst remake or sequel and all that. But I gotta say, looking back on it, okay, this came out 25 years ago. Mission Impossible 2, MI2 came out 25 years ago. I figure I was in 9th grade when this movie came out. This was the big shit back in the summer of 2000. And I remember I didn't even get to see the movie until it came out on VHS. But I did check out the soundtrack when that movie came out, my uncle, he purchased the soundtrack. It was banging. There were some really good songs on the soundtrack. You had Metallica, Butthole Surfers, Limp Bizkit, Chris Cornell. You had think I don't think Kid Rock was on there. No, it was Uncle Kracker was on there. I think Kid Rock was on. I can't remember. It had an amazing soundtrack, and then when the movie came out, the movie just blew me away. It's like it's not your typical spy film. It's more of like a real good action movie, but it's very underrated. But people didn't really care too much for it. Just like with Mission Impossible 3, when that came out, looking at that one, the critical response, it was a little bit better than the second one, and people found the third one to be their personal favorite, because of the late Philip Seymour Hoffman was in it. But I gotta say, like, with each movie that has come out, one right after the other is usually outdone the other one, like this whole movie franchise, you got different plots to it. You got the character, Ethan Hunt played by Tom Cruise, he carries on. And then some of the movies, some of the entries, you have Ving Rhames, who plays Luther Stickwell. I think it's Stickwell or Stickle. I forgot what his last name was, but it's Luther. He's Luther to me. He's in some of the films. And, of course, Mission Impossible 3 introduced Simon Pegg as Benji. The character Benji works alongside Ethan Hunt and so forth. So, yeah, you got a pretty good little cast of characters in each film. And looking at them each, like there's 8 of them, right? And I was looking at it, I was like, you know what? The way the movie franchise kind of plays out, it almost kind of plays out, not canon to it, but almost in a little bit of relation to the Harry Potter franchise. Now, just hear me out. Harry Potter had 8 films, right? 7 books, 8 films. 1 book was split into 2 films, right? You had the Sorcerer's Stone, Chamber of Secrets, The Prisoner of Azkaban, Goblet of Fire, Order of the Phoenix, Half-Blood Prince, and then you had Deathly Hallows 1 and 2. 8 films, right? So the Mission Impossible franchise, I gotta say, kind of has a timeline sort of that, because, with Dead Reckoning and the Final Reckoning being both not just filmed back to back and released on separate years, separate dates, but just the way they both play out in a sense, like the way they continue off of one another. Like, okay, part 1, Ethan is after this key, that holds the fate of the world in his hands, and then the second one, the Final Reckoning, continues that plot for him to go seek out something else that goes along with that key. So I'm just thinking about it when I watch this movie. I was like, damn, it almost feels like I'm watching a spy version of Harry Potter. The way the movies played out. Each franchise has 8 movies. They sort of play out sort of in a similar sense, the way the movies are all set up. But yes, The Final Reckoning, this is the sequel to Dead Reckoning Part 1. It is the 8th, and yes, this is the final installment in the Mission Impossible film franchise. And yes, Tom Cruise did come out and say that, yeah, in May 2025, looking at the future of the films, during the New York premiere for this film, Tom Cruise told The Hollywood Reporter that this film is the last one in the franchise, adding that the film isn't called The Final Reckoning for no reason. Now, he did say earlier on that he would be open up to, future installments if they were available. But, as for the franchise right now, yes, this is the final film in this franchise. And let me tell you why. Because I'm not going to go too much into the plot. I might give some spoilers away. So, spoiler alert, guys. If you don't want to hear me explain a little bit of the plot to you guys, go out, see the film, come back, and watch the review. But I will say, the way this pans out, okay. Now, what the hell was I saying? I had it on the tip of my tongue, goddamn. Oh, shit, I had it on the tip of my tongue. I was getting ready to say something, and I forgot what the hell I was going to say. Oh, Jesus Christ. So, let's see. So, this film pretty much ties, that's what I was going to say. This film will have fans of the franchise pretty much up in arms because there are some returning characters from a couple of the past movies. One of them, which makes a surprising return, and for great reason. And this comes as a spoiler, guys. Like I said, spoiler alert. So, actor, if I can find it, actor Rolf Saxon. If you don't know who Rolf Saxon, I didn't even know what his actual name was, but he was in the Mission Impossible movie from 1996. He played CIA analyst William Dunlow, Dunlow, William Dunlow. If you've seen the first Mission Impossible, you know who William Dunlow is. He was the guy who designed the vault, the vault that nobody could break into, but Ethan broke into it. Where he was dangling on a wire to pretty much upload a knock list on a disc. He couldn't make a sound, he couldn't sweat, he couldn't breathe heavy or anything like that. Yeah, that William Dunlow. He makes a surprising return in this film for a surprising reason, he does not die off, but he does serve a good purpose in this film. And there's a little bit of backstory to what happened to that guy from that movie decades ago. And of course, you got, Ving Rhames, who makes his last grand appearance in here as Luther Stickel. Yeah, Stickel. That's Stickel? Yeah, Stickel. And you got Simon Pegg, who returns as Benji Dunn. And Henry Zemi as Eugene Kittredge from the first movie, who was also in the last Mission Impossible movie, the Dead Reckoning. So you got a few characters that return from the past to pretty much haunt Ethan in a sense, but not really haunt him in a way. Even one particular character who is pretty much related to a character from the first Mission Impossible movie. So This movie has quite a few surprises up its sleeve for being the last one. Not only that, this movie ties together the other movies very well with each mission from each of its own movies. Like even the opening sequence, the first 15 minutes of the movie before the credits even roll, the infamous Mission Impossible theme plays. 15 minutes in, you got a little bit of backstory of what's going on since the last film, and then there's a little montage of different clips from each film in the franchise that explains a little backstory for Ethan Hunt and his incredible missions. Even Mission Impossible 2 had some clips in there, There was clips from every entry of the franchise leading up to now. This is everything that you have done, basically, leads up to this point in your life, and it's just like a little brief catch up. It's a little bit of nostalgia for fans of the series, who have been there since the beginning, and it's just it's a nice niche to just the franchise, of course. Now, what is the story about? So the plot basically is about a rogue AI computer virus that has taken over cyberspace, and it's AI that can easily manipulate people, and it's got to be stopped by Ethan Hunt. And the world is on the brink of war, where the AI can take control of the military's missile commands, like in each different country, like Russia, United Kingdom, China, U.S., and such, and they got so many days before the AI takes over and starts a whole-out nuclear war against the... And we've seen stuff like this before, haven't we? How about movies like The Terminator? Where Cyberdyne, where they're on the brink of the world, the end of the world, where the computer systems take over and, they become self-aware, and they start launching nukes. Yeah, this is pretty much like a real toned down version of Terminator. like back then we didn't know what AI was. We didn't know what artificial intelligence was when Terminator came out. But now, artificial intelligence is implemented in pretty much everything we use. You know, like cell phones, computers, computer laptops, CPUs, tablets, video game consoles, and shit. Those Alexas that people have plugged into their homes. You know, the artificial intelligence. You know, it can become self-aware if we don't watch it. There are movies out there that are warning us of the signs. Be careful with what you do with AI. That stuff can become self-aware, and that's what happens in this movie. The AI, which is titled the Entity, is taken over, and Ethan needs to find a particular tool that can help shut down the Entity from taking over cyberspace, from creating World War II. Or, well, not World War II, but World War III. I'm sorry. Creating World War III. And not only that, you got different government agencies that are trying to go after it, to take control, to be able to use the Entity. Whoever has it in their possession has the power of the Entity to be able to do whatever. So you got different agencies that are trying to go after it, to use it to their own benefit. You got Ethan, who's going after it to try to catch it, to try to destroy it, to save all of mankind. So this is a big movie. This is the biggest, most impossible mission that Ethan Hunt has on his plate, you know, in order to save billions of lives within a time period, you know, with his team trying to help him out the best they can, while other agencies are, you know, they're pretty much out to get him. You got some rogue agents that are brain warped by the Entity, you know, to try to stop him from doing so. So that's pretty much what the entire movie is Ethan Hunt is going after this decoder, which is located in a submarine, which is laying at the bottom of the Arctic Ocean. So he's got this key. He needs this key to get down there to unlock this door, and then grab this thing and then bring it up. And then he's got to, you know, get a hold of this USB drive that Luther modifies as a poison, as like a poison virus for the Entity. And I know it seems like there's a whole lot going on, but the basis of the movie is this one man who's got billions of lives in the palm of his hands, and he's very limited in time to try to save the world from a big nuclear war. And I gotta say, like, everything is very well paced out with the story. The action is pretty standard. There's not a whole lot of action in this movie that you probably would expect, but I will say the story does come together very well, especially since this story takes relation back to Mission Impossible 3, 4 key elements from Mission Impossible 3, which includes something called the Rabbit's Foot, whereas in the third entry, Ethan Hunt was on the hunt to get this thing called the Rabbit's Foot. He didn't know what it was. He didn't know anything about it. You learn a lot more about that in this movie. You learn that, yeah, what Ethan did when he grabbed that, he pretty much started a chain reaction of things that led up to this moment. So, yeah, this movie does take a lot of flashback to the previous entries that pretty much leads up to right now. So this movie has a bunch of tricks up its sleeve. It's got a bunch of twists, a few turns in it, but it does take you on one hell of a ride. You know, seeing Tom Cruise put his character through, you know, probably the most impressive and possibly impossible stunts, from deep sea diving in the Arctic Ocean, you know, and trying to swim the shore without the suit on, to doing a aerial chase in these airplanes, as you can see on the poster, which is, you know, it's a good bit where he's doing that. So, yeah, even though there's not a whole lot of action to go with, the story is very well told. Everything is very well put together, on the edge of your seat, action and story. You're rooting for the character. You're you're rooting for Ethan the entire way. Time is at hands, and everything's just done at the last second. There are some characters that do get killed off that may make some fans of the series cry a little bit, maybe. But other than that, it's got a really solid story to it. I really did enjoy this one. This was a really good send off. It's a good finale to the franchise that started long ago. It ties all the movies together very well indeed. It brings some characters back that you wouldn't think would come back. Some characters you thought may have been dead and long gone, but it does it very well. And I just can't imagine anyone not really liking this movie. I mean, even if you're not, if you're not a fan of it, it is understandable. This movie does have an 80% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which is still a pretty good rating to say. Even Post Track gave it an 89%, with 79% saying that they would definitely recommend this movie. And then, of course, if you look at the mixed review on RogerEbert.com, I'm not a big fan of Roger Ebert. Brian Tallarico criticized the first hour of the film as repetitive and pretentious to the point of parody and the worst segment in the entire franchise, but praised the action sequences as enough to ignore everything wrong with the movie up to that point. I wouldn't say so. Like, yes, the first 15 minutes kind of jumps around a little bit with different timelines and different segments that try to explain everything and put everything into perspective. But other than that, once it starts to bring itself together as a whole, once it starts to become more self-aware of where it's at in the movie, rather than try to spend a little bit more time explaining what happened in the events of the last couple months, which take place, in between both movies. It's a 2-month gap. It pretty much does its best to catch you up to date with what's going on. Let's see. Carrie Darling of the Houston Chronicle described the film as a disappointing installment, with the movie being nearly 3 hours of your life that you will never get back. No, it is not that disappointing. It is not that disappointing. Now, yes, they did what they could to try to end the franchise the way they did. And yes, this movie is almost 3 hours long. 2 hours and 40 minutes. I think this is probably the longest entry in the franchise to date. Amy Nicholson in the Los Angeles Times, here we go, liberal news, said that there are almost no conversations, only premonitions and plans delivered to bullet points like a group research project. No one steps on anyone else's dramatic pauses. They may as well be reciting how to build up an IKEA Billy bookcase. Now, this whole statement, yes, it's very liberal. So this person didn't even really watch this movie at all. This person didn't really watch this movie. Almost no conversations. The whole movie is conversational. It is. Yes, there are some flashbacks that explain certain scenes, that explain certain plot points. Yeah. But all in all, there are conversation pieces in it. So, to Amy Nicholson, the Los Angeles Times, liberal, your statement, yeah, it's no good here. It holds no water. I'm sorry. Now, it may just be me, the fan of this franchise, saying that, but I will say I watched this movie. Like, when I say I watched it, I watched it. I watched it, and I enjoyed it. Like, with movies like this, to some people, it can be a little difficult to understand the plot because it's a spy film. But once you get into the plot and you start understanding certain key plots, you're like, oh, okay, so he's got to do this in order to do this, which leads to that. Once you understand that, everything just trickles into place, that kind of thing. But other than that, other than these negative reviews from these liberal sites, I do got to say, like, 80%, 89% for this film is probably fair from some of the critics. Now, the critics don't make up the reviews. They don't make up the honest reviews for movies like this. If you're a fan of the Mission Impossible franchise, make up your own observation. Make your own opinion about it. Go and see the film. Did I enjoy this? Yes, I enjoyed it a lot. I was waiting so long for this sequel, and it finally came out. I finally got to watch it. It's a phenomenal closure to the franchise that I loved watching. You know, I've seen every film in the franchise. Yes, the third one is not my favorite. I still watched it. I still remember it too. But each film pretty much overdoes the last one, basically. Outperforms the last one, I would just say. This one, it may not outperform movies like Fallout, but it's definitely a good closure, and it definitely brings the whole franchise around full circle. It ties everything together really well, really nice, has a really nice ending, a really nice send-off to it, and I can't believe the franchise is finally over, you know, like 8 films in, like every time there was a Mission Impossible movie announced, you know, I'd be fucking like, woo, shit, another one, good, can't wait, you know? But yeah, I have been long waiting this one. You know, the Dead Reckoning was amazing. The way it closed off, you know, kind of closed off, like I said, Harry Potter and Deathly Hallows Part 1. That's pretty much how it closed off, you know, that cliffhanger ending, or even Fast X, you know, which just came out, you know, but we don't talk about Fast X anymore. So what rating do I give Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning? I love this movie to death. There may be a couple little flaws with it. It may not be as much action, but you know what? I enjoyed the story. I enjoy how it closed it off. Tom Cruise can finally retire Ethan Hunt, put him to rest. You know, he's safe and sound. You know, no more impossible missions for this guy. I give Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, a 9 out of 10. Now, did you guys see this movie? Did you guys enjoy this movie? What are your thoughts on it? Leave me your thoughts down in the comment section. I would love to have an interaction with you guys if you watch this movie. And so that does it for today's review, guys. I want to thank you once again here for coming in, checking out the podcast today, hitting that like, subscribe button on your way out if you guys enjoy the content here. Hope you guys have a happy Memorial Day. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day tonight. You know, go out there, barbecue, see some movies, hang out with the family and the friends, whatever. And guys, until next time, I will catch you right back here at the cinema.